Hello and welcome back to Season 8, Episode 17 of the Everyday Christian Podcast. I'm your host, Chase Green. This is a podcast where we remind ourselves that God deserves every praise from every creature every day. We are rapidly coming to the end of this season studying the book of Ecclesiastes. That is my favorite book of the Bible, and I've really enjoyed this. I hope that you've enjoyed this study. We've got just a few episodes left. We're going to look at Chapter 10 this week. The Folly of Violating True Wisdom. So we're going to see a lot of rapid-fire verses that deal with various wise sayings that Solomon has, kind of similar to Proverbs here in Ecclesiastes chapter 10. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading in verse number 1. Dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart at his left. Even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone that he is a fool. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for conciliation pacifies great offenses. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, as an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, while the rich sit in a lowly place. I have seen servants on horses, while princes walk on the ground like servants. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. He who quarries stones may be hurt by them, and he who splits wood may be endangered by it. If the axe is dull, and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength, but wisdom brings success. A serpent may bite when it is not charmed. The babbler is no different. The words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness. A fool also multiplies words. No man knows what is to be. Who can tell him what will be after him? The labor of fools wearies them, for they do not even know how to go to the city. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobles, and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. Because of laziness the building decays, and through idleness of hands the house leaks. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes merry, but money answers everything. Do not curse the king, even in your thought. Do not curse the rich, even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air may carry your voice, and a bird in flight may tell the matter. Isn't this an interesting chapter? We're in Ecclesiastes chapter 10, so we've got a lot of rapid-fire, wise sayings. I love this. I love the book of Proverbs as well. There's so many wise thoughts that you can think about that will help us really in just everyday life. I'm reminded of 2 Peter 1 verse 3 that says, according to God's divine power, He's given us all things that pertain to life and godliness. And certainly Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, they definitely help with that. So again, we're talking about the folly of violating true wisdom. We're looking at a lot of foolishness in this chapter, those who do not practice wisdom that is before us. So let's go ahead and go back and begin in verse number 1. It says, Dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. Isn't that quite the picture, right? You can have the best smelling perfume in the world, but if you mix in just a few dead flies, it's quickly going to become the worst smelling perfume in the world. The metaphor is this: a man respected for much wisdom and honor, he will quickly become tainted and known as a fool if he allows just a little foolishness to set in. Do you think that Solomon might be looking back at his own experience with dallying in foolishness here? I think so. Verse number 2. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart at his left. I'm not sure if this is just thinking about cultural preference to the right hand instead of the left, probably just due to the prevalence of right-handedness more so than left-handedness. But there are expressions like this, the right arm of the law or right-hand man. According to Patheos.com, the words right hand appear 166 times in the Bible. What does the right hand symbolize or mean in the Bible? Well, Isaiah 41 verse 13 says, "For I, the Lord your God, will hold your right hand, saying to you, fear not, I will help you." Luke 22 verses 42 and 43, "Now David himself said in the book of Psalms, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, till I make your enemies your footstool." Mark 16 verse 19, "So then after the Lord had spoken to them, he was received up into heaven, and sat down at the right hand of God." Genesis 48 verse 14, "Then Israel stretched out his right hand, and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn." The right hand symbolizes strength or authority or power or blessing in the Bible. So preference for the right hand in this verse over the left hand seems to signify on the right hand a heart of wisdom, and the left hand a heart of foolishness. Reminiscent of the fact that Jesus on Judgment Day will separate the sheep to his right from the goats on his left, right? So the sheep will enter into heaven, the goats will be told, "Depart from me, I never knew you." So right hand, wisdom, left hand, foolishness. Verse number 3, "Even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone that he is a fool." I've got a reference written down in my Bible, Proverbs 13, verse 20, so let me go read that. Proverbs 13, verse 20 says, "He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed." So back to verse 3 of chapter 10 here, Ecclesiastes, "Even a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone that he is a fool." Even if he's just walking off by himself, perhaps not really interacting with anybody, but people are viewing him from afar, he still acts like a fool, and everyone knows it. Our young people need to understand that it really is generally pretty easy to spot a fool from a mile away. You can spot a fool simply by observing. How does he interact with people? How does he speak to people? What kinds of words does he use? How does he present himself? Does he present himself like a slob, or does he wear things that are totally inappropriate? Does he try to be neat and well presented? That would be a wise way to present oneself. How does he spend his time? How are his manners? Is he rude or is he polite? Who are his friends? What kind of music does he listen to? Does he try in school or at work? Is he a class clown? Is he lazy? On and on we could go, describing various characteristics that show if one is a fool or if he is wise. What about this one? Someone who's on a sports team. Does he try? Is he a good team player? Or does he act like he doesn't care? And maybe he lets his talent go to waste because he doesn't put out much effort. When he works, does he actually work, or is he slow, a sluggard? Does he show the virtue of diligence? So on and on we could go, comparing and contrasting the character of a fool versus the character of a wise man. A fool is going to be known even when he walks along the way. Verse number 4, "If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for conciliation pacifies great offenses." Sometimes conflict arises between rulers and their subjects, even loyal subjects who typically get along well with the ruler. When conflict arises, it is important that everyone maintains a level head, especially the ones under the ruler, for obvious reasons, right? Because the ruler has the ability to give punishments. Do not leave your post. Don't just throw your hands up and quit because a little conflict came. Conflict is to be expected. Anytime you get two or more people together in the same room, you might have some conflict. I think it would bode well for the church to do whole Bible classes really on a topical discussion of conflict resolution in the church. That's a very, very needed topic. For conciliation pacifies great offenses. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." There are ways to smooth over situations in the right way and in the right attitude to resolve conflict, to resolve any hurt feelings and make things right again. What it's going to take would be a strong dose of humility for everybody involved. If there's one thing that I've learned about all of this, it is that pride is the enemy of conflict resolution, and gossip would be another enemy of conflict resolution. Proverb 13, verse 10. I need to read this one in the King James Version. Proverb 13, verse 10 in the King James Version says, "Only by pride cometh contention, but with the well-advised is wisdom." And then Proverb 26, we're going to look at verses 20 through 22. Proverb 26, verses 20 through 22 says, "Where there is no wood, the fire goes out, and where there is no talebearer, strife ceases. As charcoal is to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. The words of a talebearer are like tasty trifles. They go down into the inmost body." So talking about the temptation to gossip there, talebearing. Also, if there's no talebearer present, the fire will go out. So the point being, when we're talking about reconciliation to pacify great offenses, conflict resolution, very important topic for us, those of us who are Christians, who are members of the church. We need that, don't we? We need to be able to resolve conflict. Verse number 5. "There is an evil I have seen under the sun, as an error proceeding from the ruler." Rulers make bad decisions, don't they, sometimes? And so errors proceeding from the ruler, that is a bad thing that happens sometimes under the sun. Verses 6 and 7, you'll notice verse 5, there is a colon after that. So verses 6 and 7 are going to build on the thought of verse 5. So we're talking about rulers making errors, making bad judgments, bad decisions. And then it says in verse 6 and 7, "Folly or foolishness is set in great dignity, while the rich sit in a lowly place. I have seen servants on horses, while princes walk on the ground like servants." I think Solomon is juxtaposing those who are rich and powerful, but they act terribly. He's juxtaposing them with those who have nothing and no power, but they are honorable and good. Society often glorifies and encourages foolishness, wickedness, being one who perverts justice, etc. All the while, those who are humble and righteous and just can oftentimes be looked down upon. I'm reminded of Isaiah 5, verse 20, I think it is. "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil." Solomon says that he has seen people that should be servants sit on horses. They're the ones sitting on horses as leaders, even though their character should say that they should be the servants. While he has seen people that should be the leaders, because of their good character, they are the ones that are walking on the ground as servants. He calls these servants princes because of their character, their attitude, their virtue. And he calls the others, those who are rich and in a lowly place with their character, he sees that they have great dignity, and really they are only fit to be servants. Verse number 8. "He who digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent." The general principle here is that a person who builds a trap may become a victim of his own devising. Haman comes to mind in the book of Esther. He was hanged on his own gallows. Whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. This is the same general idea. You might break through someone's wall with bad intentions to harm them, only to be bitten by a snake on the other side of the wall and die, or maybe met with a shotgun or a 9mm or whatnot. Verse number 9. "He who quarries stones may be hurt by them, and he who splits wood may be endangered by it." I think this is just referencing the fact that Sometimes people get hurt on the job. It is a sad and unfortunate thing, but it does happen. Certainly wisdom would say that one needs to be careful on the job. Maybe there's more of a kind of a deeper spiritual meaning here too, that we just need to be careful with the choices that we make. Verse number 10, if the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. But wisdom brings success. Wisdom brings success may also be translated as, but wisdom is a successful advantage. What will the wise individual do if his axe blade is dull? Will he keep chopping with a dull blade and waste a lot of his strength? No, he's going to sharpen the blade, right? And so work smarter, not harder. That is the wisdom here of verse number 10. Verse 11, a serpent may bite when it is not charmed. The babbler is no different. In other words, be extremely careful when dealing with snakes. You better charm it so you don't get bitten. And when dealing with a babbler, a fool, literally in the Hebrew, a master of the tongue, a flatterer, we might say, you better be very careful because that kind of person will bite you. Verse number 12, the words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. A wise man will choose his words carefully. He'll use them for graciousness, for building people up. I'm reminded of Ephesians 4, verse 29. It says, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. A fool's lips will swallow him up. His words will trap him and get him into a whole lot of trouble. Verse number 13 is going to continue along the same lines. The words of his mouth, a fool's mouth, begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness. So you almost get the picture of maybe a politician or somebody giving a speech, and the beginning of the speech is just foolishness, and by the end of it, it is just utter madness. It just goes from bad to worse. That's kind of the idea here. And so maybe we're familiar with people who their speech can be characterized that way. Maybe you know somebody that you just don't believe a word that he says. He would lie when the truth sounds better. Or maybe talks a bunch of nonsense all the time. Maybe he's just saying things that don't really make any sense. Maybe trying to puff himself up or whatnot. It says in verse number 14, a fool also multiplies words. No man knows what is to be. Who can tell him what will be after him? I think the same idea here is sometimes there are people who are foolish and they just go on and on and on, and they don't really get around to saying much of anything of worth. They're just speaking foolishness. There's a term that is I've heard in fairly recent years, word salad, trying to sound smart, and so you put all these fancy words in and you mix them up and you make a salad, but what you're saying makes absolutely no sense, right? It would be much better to use common, simple language, down-to-earth language, and actually get your point across than to try to sound really smart and eloquent, but use all these fancy words that aren't even used properly. And so that's foolishness, and maybe you know or have been around someone that has acted that way. Wisdom would tell you, just watch out for a person like that. That's not somebody that you want to trifle with. Verse number 15. The labor of fools wearies them, for they do not even know how to go to the city. I think this has to do with somebody who has no common sense whatsoever. Maybe he hasn't had to work a day in his life, we might say. And so he goes out in the workplace and he doesn't do anything right. He has to be babysat by the higher-ups just to make sure that he doesn't mess something up. Maybe he's the guy that everybody wishes the boss would fire, but they just don't have the heart to do it. And so he sticks around and he's costing the company or the business. And everybody's like, why don't they get rid of this guy? Right? That's what I picture here in verse number 15. I'll read it again. The labor of fools wearies them, for they do not even know how to go to the city. Verse number 16. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. In other words, when the leadership is young and inexperienced, when the princes are foolish, and only concerned with feasting, watch out. I'm reminded of Belshazzar in Daniel, chapter 5, I believe it is. He was banqueting and partying, we might say, in the wee hours of the night, and had a drunken feast, and the handwriting on the wall appeared. God told him, your kingdom's done. It's going to be given to the Medo-Persians. And that very night they came and they took and killed Belshazzar, and they took the kingdom of Babylon, and the kingdom at that point was overthrown by Persia. So kind of same idea here. We're doomed if young, inexperienced leaders are making really bad decisions. Verse number 17. Blessed are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobles, and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. The land does well when its leadership exercises wisdom and knows the proper time and place for feasting. If there has been some kind of natural disaster or a war going on, it's not a good look if the king or the president or whatnot is going to vacation, right? Well, sometimes we might even see that in our country, but that's not good. So when there's turmoil going on, when there's difficult times, a good leader is going to get out in the midst of the people and try to help. Verse number 18. Because of laziness, the building decays, and through idleness of hands, the house leaks. We've all seen examples of dilapidated, abandoned buildings fell into disrepair because of their abandonment. At the root of the problem lies laziness. Too much leisure, not enough work. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. What happens when dilapidated houses are local congregations of the Lord's house? You ever thought about that? Laziness spiritually. It can cause the Lord's house, local congregations of the Lord's house, to suffer. So we need to think about that and make sure that we do not allow our congregations to fall into disrepair and decay. Verse number 19. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes merry, but money answers everything. Many, many things in life come back to money, don't they? Unfortunately. Money can be found at the root of much corruption in life. Let's rephrase that. The love of money, 1 Timothy 6, verse 10. It's the root of all kinds of evil. And money and what it can buy, the feast in these verses, it has a lot of influence. People can be bribed, etc. And so you need to be careful with money. We need to be good stewards of money that God gives us. It's not sinful to be rich. There are righteous, rich people in the Bible. A few of them, not very many, but there are a few. So it's not inherently sinful to have riches, but we better be good stewards of it. We better not idolize money for sure. And when it comes to wisdom, we need to be wise and realize, hey, a lot of people with a lot of money, they have power to do a lot of really bad things. Just look at politics and you'll see that. Finally, verse number 20. Do not curse the king, even in your thought. Do not curse the rich, even in your bedroom, for a bird of the air may carry your voice, and a bird in flight may tell the matter. In other words, news travels fast. A little birdie told me. That's basically where we get this expression. And so if you've ever said, a little birdie told me such and such, that saying really comes from this verse. Sometimes we see people that tend to parrot everything that they hear. People repeat things that they hear through gossip, just like parrots. The old joke is that we need to live our lives in such a way that we wouldn't mind selling our pet parrot to the town gossip, right? Because that parrot's going to go and explain all the things we've been doing to the town gossip. So we want to make sure that our lives are being lived well. So that's kind of a funny joke, but the point being that people will repeat things, and so at the beginning of the verse 20, if you curse the king, it's going to be repeated, it's going to get back to his ears, and you're going to be in serious, serious trouble. Lots of application for us on that when it comes to gossip. We don't need to be gossiping, and also, unfortunately, sometimes we might find ourselves on the receiving end of gossip. We might find ourselves the victims of gossip. So we've looked at some practical examples of wisdom and lack thereof this week. Next time we're going to look at chapter 11, Sowing unto Righteousness. So we've got that, Lord willing, next week. And then a couple weeks after this, we'll have 2 weeks of chapter 12. We're going to talk about man goeth to his everlasting home, and then the conclusion of the whole matter. So we are rapidly coming to an end of this wonderful study of the book of Ecclesiastes.